Hi, my name is Andy Mallet, and this is Glimmer DSL for SWT tutorial number 12. So last time we went through a pretty advanced widget called Code Text. Today we're going to go through another advanced widget that is basically the tree, and we're going to demonstrate it using Hello Tree. So if I launch this sample, you'll see a tree on the left side and some details on the right side. So on the left side right now, we have the CEO at the root of the tree, and below it we have the CTO, CFO, and CIO. So this is pretty much a company hierarchy. And in fact, if we dig into it, you'll see there's a VP engineering, director engineering, manager engineering, senior engineer, and a junior engineer. And if I click on one of them, like let's just say Bob Harvard, you'll notice that we get to see the details on the right side. This is a pretty common pattern in desktop applications called the master details view. Basically on the left side, you get a master list of people, and it could be a tree, it could be a list, it could be a table. It doesn't matter, but the key element about it is that it lists a bunch of people in a certain way, and then it gives you a selection. And when you select an element in that list or tree, you get to see the details on the right side. Let's dig into how the tree is programmed. So I'm going to close this sample and start looking into the models. So first of all, we have an employee struct with all of those attributes, which are the attributes that we saw on the right side. And then we have an employee class that basically extends that struct and adds a whole bunch of behavior. Basically has a whole bunch of class methods like the selected employee attribute on the class that keeps track of which element in the tree was selected. It basically pre-constructs a whole bunch of different positions like the CEO, CTO, and CFO, etc. So what it basically does is generates a whole bunch of data that we will later use in the view. So if we scroll down and get to the view part, you'll see that we have a body, and then we have a before body hook and an after body hook. And the before body hook, all we're doing is basically pre-selecting the first employee as the CEO. And then in the after body hook, we're just saying we want the tree to be expanded for one level. And then if we were to get into the code of the GUI, one interesting thing is that not only is tree used in this sample, but a whole bunch of other widgets that are pretty interesting to learn about, like sash form. So if I were to launch this again, as you can see, we have this area on the left side and an area on the right side, and they're separated by a sash. And the sash is basically this thing that lets you resize the two different areas. And you can set weights, like initial weights for it. So it's 1 to 2, that's the ratio. And then the user can adjust it any way they like. However, if we were to get into the tree, here's the tree widget, which is under the first composite. And as you can see, it's got items and it's got a selection. The selection data binding is pretty simple. It's just storing the selection into the selected employee attribute on the employee class. This one is a class attribute. So that part is simple. However, items is a lot more sophisticated because tree data binding is a lot more than just data binding an attribute. You need a lot more information. Like for example, how do you dig into the children of the attribute? So for example, the data binding starts with the CEO at the root. So that's what you data bind for the attribute, is who is the root of the tree. But additionally, you need to provide tree properties like how do we obtain children? Well, we obtain them by calling the subordinates method. How do we display each child in the tree? You call the 2s method. So if we were to go back to the model, there's a subordinates method that keeps track of subordinates for each element in the tree, and then there's a 2s method that prints the first name, last name, and position. And in fact, if I launch it, this is what we see here. So these three elements are the subordinates of John Smith. Bill Williams is the subordinate of Noah Johnson, etc. And then the 2s method is printing what you see over here, the first name, last name, and position. There's a lot more at play over here. Basically, as you can see, we have a sort of a nested data binding going on because we're data binding, for example, the position. to the position attribute on a model that is within the tree. So let me show you how that works. So for example, if I were to look at this combo for position, it's not data binding to a symbol on employee. Instead, it's using a string, and it includes a dot in order to do nested data binding. So it's basically binding to the position attribute on the selected employee that is on the employee class. So this is a good example of nested data binding, which is very useful in cases like this one, like a master details view. In fact, a combo by convention will expect an attribute that matches the name of this attribute, but also has options at the end in order to provide the available options for the combo. So for example, position options will give me all of those. And if I launch here and look at position, you'll get all of those options. Another interesting widget here is the spinner, which is useful for numeric values, and it can even include decimals. So if I were to close and scroll down, we have a spinner. We have a bunch of spinners, but I mean, here's one. You can specify the maximum, minimum values, and then data bind it and do nested data binding as well. In fact, this last spinner over here uses an on-read converter and an on-write converter for the value. So, I mean, you could do a whole bunch of advanced things. So, I mean, this example is pretty much in the big leagues of desktop development. This is a real, a real-world example of how an application might look like. So, yeah, that pretty much covers what a tree widget is. In order to learn more about Glimmer DSL for SWT, check out the GitHub project.